My name is Norton, and at 32, I finally achieved my dream of owning my own home in Seattle after years of hard work as a software developer. I was so proud of my accomplishment that I kept it a secret from my parents until I was fully settled in. When I finally revealed my news, their initial congratulations quickly turned into something else entirely. Suddenly, my perfect little craftsman house wasn't my achievement. It was the solution to my brother Derek's space problems. What should have been my proudest moment became the catalyst for a family implosion I never saw coming. Before I tell you how my dream home turned into a family nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family try to claim what's rightfully yours. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, I learned early on that family dynamics aren't always fair. My parents, Richard and Elaine, never tried to hide the fact that my brother Derek was their favorite. It wasn't anything they explicitly stated, but their actions spoke volumes throughout our childhood. When Derek needed new soccer cleats, he got the latest Nike model. When I needed new cleats the following season, I got his hand-me-downs that barely fit. When Derek made the junior varsity basketball team, my parents rearranged their work schedules to attend every game. When I placed second in the regional science fair, they sent my grandmother because they had prior commitments. These patterns continued throughout our formative years, creating an unspoken hierarchy in our family that was impossible to ignore. The favoritism became even more apparent when we reached college age. Derek got accepted to University of Oregon with a partial athletic scholarship. My parents proudly announced they would cover the remainder of his tuition, room, and board. When I got accepted to Washington State University with an academic scholarship that covered about 60% of my tuition, my parents sat me down for a realistic conversation about finances. They explained that they had already committed to supporting Derek and suggested I consider community college instead. I refused, taking out loans and working 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore to make ends meet. During those 4 years, I developed a fierce independence. I didn't go home for most holidays because I couldn't afford the bus ticket. Instead, I picked up extra shifts and used the holiday pay to chip away at my growing student loan debt. I graduated with honors, but my parents and Derek only made it to the ceremony because it happened to coincide with a baseball tournament Derek was playing in nearby. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a growing tech company in Seattle. The starting salary wasn't impressive, but it offered a foot in the door to one of the country's most vibrant tech scenes. My parents seemed vaguely proud, but quickly shifted the conversation to Derek's new job coaching high school basketball. He was still living at home, saving money while he figured things out. Those first few years in Seattle were challenging. I shared a cramped 2-bedroom apartment with 3 other recent graduates in a less than desirable neighborhood. We split everything 4 ways: rent, utilities, groceries, and the single bathroom. I slept on a futon in what should have been the dining room, with only a bookshelf providing any semblance of privacy. But I never complained. This was my path to independence, and I was determined to make it work. Over the next 8 years, I poured myself into my career. I moved companies twice, each time securing a significant bump in salary and responsibilities. I was promoted to senior developer, then lead developer, establishing myself as someone reliable who delivered results. I developed a reputation for solving complex problems and mentoring junior team members. My bosses recognized my potential, and I began to see a clear career trajectory ahead of me. Meanwhile, my living situation gradually improved. I moved from the shared apartment to a studio of my own, then eventually to a 1-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood. It wasn't fancy. The appliances were outdated, the carpet was worn in high-traffic areas, and the bathroom sink drained slowly no matter how many times I cleaned the trap. But it was mine, and I took pride in that independence. Despite the improvements, apartment living had its limitations. The walls were thin enough that I knew my neighbor Harold's television watching schedule by heart. The couple above me seemed to rearrange their furniture weekly, always after 10 p.m. And every time I wanted to try a new recipe, I was reminded of how inadequate my galley kitchen was, barely enough counter space to chop an onion, let alone prepare a proper meal. As I approached my 30s, I began to feel a growing desire for something more permanent. My friend Marcus had purchased a condo the year before and couldn't stop talking about the benefits of building equity instead of throwing money away on rent. "Every payment you make is an investment in your future," he'd say. "Plus, you can put as many holes in the walls as you want." The idea took root. I started researching the Seattle housing market and quickly realized that homeownership in the city was a daunting prospect. Prices had skyrocketed over the past decade, and the competition was fierce. But instead of being discouraged, I became determined. I created a detailed spreadsheet tracking my income, expenses, and savings. I cut back on non-essentials, fewer meals out, a more modest vacation budget, and a strict moratorium on unnecessary tech purchases, which was particularly challenging given my profession. For 3 years, I lived by this disciplined budget. I took on freelance projects on weekends to accelerate my savings. I maximized my company's matching contributions to my retirement accounts. I researched first-time homebuyer programs and met with a financial advisor to ensure my credit score was in optimal shape. Every financial decision was viewed through the lens of my ultimate goal: homeownership, before I turned 33. The journey wasn't always smooth. There were unexpected expenses, a major dental procedure not fully covered by insurance, replacing my aging laptop when it finally gave up, helping Marcus after a fender bender left him temporarily without transportation. Each setback adjusted my timeline slightly, but I remained focused. Throughout this period, my communication with my family was minimal. We exchanged obligatory calls on birthdays and holidays, and I made the trip back to Portland once or twice a year. During these visits, my parents would update me on Derek's life. He had moved up to varsity coach. He had started dating a kindergarten teacher named Jessica. He was thinking about going back for his master's degree. They rarely asked about my life in Seattle, and when they did, they seemed to listen with half an ear, waiting for an opportunity to steer the conversation back to more interesting topics. By the time I hit 32, I had saved enough for a decent down payment. I wasn't going to be able to afford my dream home in one of Seattle's premium neighborhoods, but I had enough to start looking for something modest in a decent area. I was ready to take the next step toward building the stable, independent life I had been working toward for so long. When I finally had enough saved for a down payment, I contacted a realtor named Stephanie who came highly recommended by Marcus. She was straightforward and didn't sugarcoat the realities of Seattle's competitive housing market. "With your budget, we'll need to be strategic," she explained during our first meeting. "The perfect house in the perfect neighborhood probably isn't happening, but the right house in a good neighborhood is definitely possible." Armed with pre-approval from my bank and a wish list of features ranked by importance, we began the search. Those first few months were an education in disappointment. We'd find a house in my price range, only to discover it needed a new roof, updated electrical, or had foundation issues that would cost tens of thousands to fix. Or we'd find a well-maintained property, only to be outbid by buyers offering 20% over asking, all cash, with inspection waivers. One Sunday, we toured a small bungalow that checked most of my boxes. The kitchen had been recently updated. The location was reasonably close to work, and the price seemed fair. I was ready to make an offer when Stephanie pointed out water damage in the basement that hadn't been disclosed. "You don't want to start homeownership with a major remediation project," she advised. I reluctantly agreed, and we continued the search. After 6 months of weekends spent at open houses and evenings poring over new listings, my enthusiasm began to wane. Maybe Marcus had been right about buying a condo instead of a single-family home. Maybe I should adjust my expectations or wait another year to save more. I shared these thoughts with Stephanie during what I had decided would be our final weekend of house hunting. "Let's try one more," she suggested. "It just came on the market yesterday. The photos don't do it justice, but I have a good feeling about this one." The moment we pulled up to the craftsman-style house on a tree-lined street in the Greenwood neighborhood, Something felt different. The house wasn't imposing, just a modest one-story with a covered front porch and classic craftsman details. The yard was small but featured mature maple and cherry trees that provided privacy from the street. Inside, sunlight streamed through original leaded glass windows, illuminating hardwood floors that needed refinishing, but were otherwise in good condition. The layout was compact but thoughtful: 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a formal dining room, and a living room with a brick fireplace. The kitchen was outdated with laminate countertops and basic appliances, but everything was clean and functional. "The owners have lived here for 40 years, Stephanie explained. "They're downsizing to a retirement community. It needs some updates, but the bones are solid, and they've maintained it well." As we explored, I could envision myself in the space. The 2nd bedroom would make a perfect home office. The backyard, though modest, had enough room for a small patio where I could grill and entertain friends. Even the quirky details: built-in bookshelves flanking the fireplace, a breakfast nook with a window seat, the slightly sloped floor in the hallway added character rather than concern. For the first time in months of searching, I felt a connection to a property. This wasn't just a financial investment or a step up from apartment living. This felt like it could be home. I tried to temper my excitement, knowing competition would be fierce, but I couldn't help imagining myself living there. "What do you think?" Stephanie asked as we finished the tour. "I want to make an offer," I replied without hesitation. Stephanie cautioned that there would likely be multiple bids, especially since the house was priced competitively to sell quickly. She suggested offering slightly above asking price and including a personal letter to the sellers explaining why I wanted their home. That night, I wrote about my appreciation for the craftsmanship, my plans to preserve the character while updating certain features, and my desire to build a life in a home as well loved as theirs had obviously been. The next 48 hours were agonizing. Stephanie called with updates. There were indeed multiple offers. The sellers were reviewing everything carefully. They appreciated my letter but were considering a higher bid. Just when I had resigned myself to disappointment, Stephanie called again. The highest offer had financing contingencies that made the sellers nervous. If I could increase my offer by $15,000 and minimize contingencies, they might choose mine instead. It would stretch my budget to the absolute limit, requiring me to postpone some of the immediate updates I had planned. But I didn't hesitate. "Do it," I told her. "This is the one." 3 hours later, she called back with the news. My offer had been accepted. I sat on the floor of my apartment, overwhelmed with emotion, pride, excitement, terror, and disbelief all mingling together. I had done it. After years of saving and months of searching, I was going to be a homeowner. The closing process was a whirlwind of paperwork, inspections, and last-minute requests from the bank. There were moments when I feared the whole deal would fall through. The inspection revealed some electrical issues that needed immediate attention. The appraisal came in slightly below my offer price, requiring additional negotiation. But Stephanie guided me through each obstacle with calm expertise. 30 days later, I sat at a closing table signing what felt like hundreds of documents, each signature bringing me closer to homeownership. When the closing agent finally slid the keys across the table, I felt a surge of emotion I wasn't prepared for. These weren't just keys to a building. They were keys to a future I had built for myself, through years of hard work and sacrifice. That night, I slept on an air mattress in what would become my bedroom. The house was empty, except for a few essentials I had brought over the air mattress: a lamp, my laptop, and a bottle of champagne Marcus had given me as a housewarming gift. It wasn't comfortable, but it was possibly the most satisfying night's sleep I'd ever had. As I lay there in the dark, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and settling sounds of my new home, I thought about sharing the news with my parents. I knew I should tell them about this major life milestone, but something held me back. Past experience had taught me that my achievements were often minimized or redirected to conversations about Derek. I wanted to enjoy this victory, to settle in and make the house truly mine before subjecting it to potential criticism or indifference. I'll tell them once I'm settled, I decided. Once the furniture is in and I've made it my own. This decision wasn't about spite or secrecy. It was about protecting my joy during this significant transition. I wanted to experience the pride of homeownership without it being diminished by comparison or critique. It seemed like a reasonable boundary at the time, though I had no idea how significantly that decision would impact my relationship with my family in the months to come. The first few weeks in my new house were a blur of activity. I spent evenings after work unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and making endless lists of projects and purchases. Though the house was structurally sound, there were plenty of cosmetic improvements I wanted to make to transform it from the previous owner's home into my own. I prioritized projects based on necessity and budget. The electrical issues flagged during the inspection were addressed immediately by a licensed electrician. The bathroom sink's leaky faucet was next, followed by weather stripping around the doors and windows to improve energy efficiency. These weren't glamorous projects, but they were essential to making the house safe and functional. With the necessities addressed, I turned my attention to the cosmetic changes that would have the biggest impact. The living room walls, previously a faded beige, were my first target. Marcus came over on a Saturday, and we spent the day prepping and painting, transforming the space with a warm gray that brightened the room and complemented the original woodwork. We celebrated our accomplishment with pizza and beer on the floor, surrounded by drop cloths and empty paint cans. "This place is really coming together," Marcus observed. "When are you going to show it to your family?" I shrugged, deflecting the question. "Once it's more finished. You know how my mom is about decorating." The kitchen became my next focus. While a complete renovation wasn't in the budget, I found ways to update the space without breaking the bank. My coworker Justin, who had renovated several houses as side projects, helped me install new cabinet hardware, replace the dated light fixture, and apply a specialized coating to the laminate countertops that mimicked the look of stone. The transformation was remarkable for the relatively small investment. "You've got a good eye for this," Justin commented as we finished up. Most first-time homeowners try to do too much at once. The backyard had been neglected for years, with overgrown shrubs and patchy grass dominating the space. My neighbor Thomas, an avid gardener, offered advice and helped me clear out the overgrowth. Together, we pruned the mature trees, removed the scraggly shrubs, and laid fresh sod. He even gifted me some perennial plants from his own garden to add color along the fence line. "These will come back year after year," he explained as we planted them. "Low maintenance, high impact, perfect for a busy guy like you." Each project, no matter how small, increased my sense of ownership and pride. The house was gradually becoming a reflection of my tastes and priorities. I found particular satisfaction in the second bedroom's transformation into my home office. I installed floating shelves for my books, positioned my desk to take advantage of the natural light from the north-facing window, and splurged on a comfortable ergonomic chair that made working from home a pleasure rather than a necessity. As my house became a home, I also began building connections in my new neighborhood. Thomas introduced me to several other neighbors, including an elderly couple who had lived on the street for 50 years and knew the history of every house on the block. I joined the neighborhood association and signed up for the community garden waiting list. For the first time since moving to Seattle, I felt a sense of belonging that extended beyond my workplace and small circle of friends. 3 months after moving in, I hosted a housewarming party. It was nothing extravagant, just a casual gathering of friends, coworkers, and my new neighbors. We grilled in the backyard, played music, and gave impromptu tours of the house. Everyone was generous with their compliments and seemed genuinely happy for me. I found myself repeatedly saying, "I still can't believe it's mine," each time feeling the truth and weight of those words. During the party, several friends took photos, and I didn't think twice when they tagged me in their social media posts. I wasn't particularly active online, but I enjoyed seeing the images of my friends enjoying the space I'd created. What I hadn't considered was how quickly those photos might spread beyond my immediate circle. 2 days after the party, I received a call from my cousin Angela. "So, you bought a house?" she asked without preamble. "How did you?" "Facebook," she explained. "Brian's sister is friends with your friend Marcus. She showed me the photos from your housewarming. It looks amazing, Norton. Really. I'm so happy for you." I thanked her, feeling a mixture of pride and unease. "Does Aunt Elaine know?" I haven't heard her mention anything about it. There it was, the question I'd been avoiding for months. "Not yet," I admitted. "I've been waiting for the right time." Angela was silent for a moment. "You know they're going to find out eventually, right? Especially now that people are posting about it." "I know. I'm planning to tell them when I go home for Thanksgiving. I just wanted to get settled first." "I get it," she said, though her tone suggested she didn't entirely. "Your house, your news to share. I won't say anything." I appreciated her discretion, but her call planted a seed of anxiety. If Angela had seen the photos, how many other family members might have as well? Would someone mention it to my parents before I had the chance to tell them myself? Over the next few weeks, this anxiety grew. I considered calling my parents several times, but always found a reason to postpone. One more project to finish. One more piece of furniture to buy. One more weekend to enjoy my achievement before subjecting it to their judgment. As Thanksgiving approached, I finally accepted that I couldn't and shouldn't put it off any longer. I had achieved something significant, something I had worked years to accomplish. If my parents couldn't appreciate that, it reflected on them, not on me or my achievement. I decided I would tell them over the holiday weekend, showing them photos and inviting them to visit in the new year if they were interested. What I couldn't have anticipated was how this plan would collide with my brother's news, setting in motion a chain of events that would fundamentally alter my family dynamics in ways I never could have predicted. Thanksgiving arrived faster than I expected. I packed an overnight bag, loaded my car with a homemade apple pie, store-bought crust, but no one needed to know that, and made the 3-hour drive from Seattle to Portland. As I drove, I rehearsed different ways of sharing my news. Should I make a formal announcement? Show them photos casually during a lull in conversation? Wait until after dinner when everyone was relaxed? I settled on finding a quiet moment with just my parents, ideally after the meal but before dessert. I had edited a small selection of photos on my phone, choosing ones that showcased the improvements I'd made while downplaying the areas still in progress. I was nervous but determined. This was my accomplishment, and I deserved to feel proud of it. When I arrived at my parents' house, it was already bustling with activity. My grandparents were there, along with Angela and her husband Brian, my Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert, and of course, Derek and Jessica. I hadn't seen Jessica in person before, though Derek had shared photos. She was visibly pregnant, her hand resting protectively on her belly as she chatted with my mother in the kitchen. "Norton," my mother called when she saw me. "You're just in time. Dinner's almost ready. Put your bag in your old room and come help set the table." My old room, which had long ago been converted into a home gym, featuring Derek's high school and college sports trophies along the walls. I would be sleeping on an air mattress tucked between a treadmill and a weight bench. Some things never changed. Dinner was the usual chaotic family affair. My grandfather told the same stories he always told. Aunt Patricia asked inappropriate questions about everyone's finances. Uncle Robert drank too much wine and got into a political debate with Brian. Through it all, I noticed my parents doting on Jessica, making sure she was comfortable, her plate was full, and her water glass never empty. Just as my mother was about to serve dessert, Derek clinked his glass with a spoon. Everyone fell silent, turning expectant eyes toward him. He reached for Jessica's hand, both of them beaming. "We have some exciting news," Derek announced. "We had an ultrasound last week, and we're having twins." The table erupted in cheers and congratulations. My mother burst into tears, rushing around the table to hug both Derek and Jessica. My father clapped Derek on the shoulder, his face a mixture of pride and disbelief. "Twins!" my grandmother exclaimed. "Oh, how wonderful. And do you know if they're boys or girls?" "One of each," Jessica said, glowing with happiness. "A boy and a girl." More exclamations of joy followed. My mother was already talking about nursery colors and baby names. My father was calculating how much they would need to contribute to 2 college funds instead of 1. The conversations swirled around the impending arrivals, everyone offering advice and sharing stories of other twins in the extended family. I was genuinely happy for Derek and Jessica. Despite the complicated history with my brother, I had no resentment toward his growing family. I congratulated them sincerely, already imagining myself as Uncle Norton, perhaps the cool uncle who taught the kids about computers and took them to science museums. As the excitement began to settle, dessert was served, and conversations broke into smaller groups. I saw my opportunity. My parents were sitting together on the living room sofa, looking through a baby name book Jessica had brought. I approached them, phone in hand, and sat in the adjacent armchair. "I have some news, too," I said, trying to keep my voice casual despite my nerves. "It's not twins, but it's pretty exciting, at least for me." "What is it, honey?" my mother asked, her attention divided between me and the name book. "I bought a house," I said, "in Seattle, about 3 months ago." That got their full attention. My father looked up sharply. "A house? You bought a house without telling us?" I nodded, scrolling to the photo gallery I had prepared. I wanted to get settled first, make it my own before sharing it. But yes, it's a Craftsman in Greenwood. 2 bedrooms, great neighborhood, close to work. I handed my phone to my mother, who began swiping through the photos with my father looking over her shoulder. To my surprise, their initial reaction seemed positive. My mother commented on the charming details and asked questions about the neighbors. My father nodded approvingly at the yard and inquired about the age of the roof. It wasn't effusive enthusiasm, but it was better than I had expected. "It's a bit small, isn't it?" my mother finally said, handing the phone back. "It's perfect for me," I replied. "Just enough space, but not too much to maintain." "And you have a spare bedroom?" my father asked. "Yes, I'm using it as a home office. I've set up a great workspace there with built-in shelves and—" "Perfect," my father interrupted, his face lighting up with an expression I rarely saw directed at me. "That's perfect timing. Derek can use that as his home office." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "What?" "For Derek," my mother chimed in, as if clarifying would help me understand. "He and Jessica have been living in that tiny 1-bedroom apartment. With twins on the way, they'll need so much more space." "But it's my house," I said slowly, trying to process what they were suggesting. "Of course it is," my mother said soothingly. "But family helps family. Derek and Jessica need more room for the babies. Your house has an extra bedroom. It's perfect." I stared at them, waiting for the punchline to a joke that wasn't coming. "Are you suggesting that Derek and Jessica move into my house? The house I just bought, in Seattle?" "Derek can work remotely," my father explained, as if logistics were my only concern. "His coaching job is seasonal anyway. And Jessica will be on maternity leave. The timing couldn't be better." I felt like I had stepped into an alternate reality. "But it's my house," I repeated, more firmly this time. "I bought it for me. I've spent months making it my home." My mother patted my knee. "And now you can share it. Isn't that wonderful? The twins will have an uncle right there to help out. You always did like babies." Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't involve shouting, Derek wandered over, Jessica at his side. "What are you guys talking about?" "Norton bought a house in Seattle," my father announced, "with a spare bedroom that would make a perfect home office for you." Derek's eyebrows shot up. You bought a house? When? 3 months ago, I said, my voice tight. And he didn't tell anyone, my mother added, with a slight edge to her voice that suggested this fact still bothered her despite her apparent enthusiasm for her new plan. It has 2 bedrooms, my father continued. And with the twins coming, you and Jessica need more space than that apartment. Derek looked confused for a moment. Then his expression cleared, as he understood what our parents were suggesting. To my dismay, he seemed to warm to the idea immediately. That could actually work. I've been talking to Coach Williams about helping with recruitment in the Washington area. Jessica looked less convinced. But all our family is here in Portland. Norton's in Seattle, my mother pointed out. And with twins, you'll need all the help you can get. I had been silently watching this conversation unfold around me, feeling increasingly invisible despite being the owner of the house in question. Finally, I found my voice. No, I said firmly. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me in surprise. What do you mean, no? My father asked, as if I had responded to a completely different question. I mean no. Derek and Jessica can't move into my house. It's my house. I bought it for myself. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face fell, her expression shifting from excitement to confusion. My father's eyebrows drew together in the way they always did before he lost his temper. Derek looked embarrassed, while Jessica seemed relieved. Norton, my mother finally said, her voice gentle but firm, as if explaining something to a child. Family helps family. Your brother needs this. And I needed support through college, I replied, surprising myself with the words that had been bottled up for years. I needed parents at my science fairs and graduation. I needed a lot of things that I didn't get, so I learned to provide for myself. This house is mine. I worked for it. I saved for it. I bought it for me. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. After everything we've done for you, Richard, my mother interrupted, placing a restraining hand on his arm. Not now. We can discuss this later, as a family. She turned to Derek and Jessica. Why don't you two look at those nursery ideas I was telling you about earlier? They took the hint and retreated to the kitchen. My mother turned back to me, her expression stern but controlled. We'll talk about this tomorrow, when everyone's had time to think. The rest of the evening was painfully awkward. Conversations happened around me rather than with me. Whenever I entered a room, voices would lower or topics would suddenly change. I considered getting in my car and driving back to Seattle that night, but the thought of a 3-hour drive after an emotionally exhausting day was too much. Instead, I inflated my air mattress in the home gym, closed the door, and tried to process what had happened. My house, my achievement, my sanctuary, my hard-earned reward for years of work and sacrifice had been unilaterally volunteered as the solution to my brother's housing needs. Not as a request, not as a discussion, but as a foregone conclusion. And my refusal had been treated not as a reasonable boundary, but as a selfish betrayal of family values. As I lay awake listening to the hum of the treadmill's digital display, I tried to imagine how I would explain this situation to Marcus or my therapist. It sounded absurd, like something from a bad sitcom. Yet it had happened. And the worst part was that some small voice inside me wondered if I was indeed being selfish. Was this what family was supposed to mean? Was I missing some fundamental understanding of familial obligation? I fell into a restless sleep, dreaming of my house filled with cribs and baby toys, while I slept on an air mattress in the corner of my own home office. The drive back to Seattle the following day was tense and lonely. I had left early, before most of the family was awake, leaving a brief note explaining I needed to get back for work. It wasn't entirely true I had the whole weekend off, but I couldn't face another day of strained silence and disapproving glances. I hoped that putting some physical distance between myself and my family would help clear my head and provide perspective. Instead, it seemed to open the floodgates for an onslaught of communication. My phone started buzzing with notifications before I even reached Olympia. My mother called first, her voice a mixture of concern and disappointment. "Norton, I wish you hadn't left so abruptly. We need to discuss the situation with Derek and Jessica like adults." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied, trying to keep my voice level. "I'm not having them move into my house. End of story." "Don't be so stubborn," she sighed. "Just think about it, please. For me, for the babies." After my mother, my father called. His approach was less gentle. "You're being selfish," he stated bluntly. "Your brother needs help, and you have the means to provide it. This is what family does." "Family also respects boundaries," I countered, "and my boundary is that my house is my house." He scoffed. "Boundaries. That's therapist talk. In real families, people make sacrifices for each other." "I've made plenty of sacrifices," I replied, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Now it's someone else's turn. By the time I reached Seattle, I had received texts from Derek as well. Unlike our parents, he at least acknowledged my position. Sort of. "Hey, I get that this is a big ask," he wrote. "But man, twins, we're freaking out about space. Could we at least come see the house and talk options?" I didn't respond immediately, needing time to process. But before I could formulate a reply, Jessica texted me a Pinterest board link titled "Nursery Ideas for Norton's Spare Room," with a message saying, "What do you think of these colors? Would they work with your current paint?" The assumption that my refusal was just a temporary obstacle to overcome, rather than a firm decision, was infuriating. It seemed that no one in my family was taking my no seriously. I turned off my phone for the remainder of the weekend, needing space from the constant barrage. When I turned it back on Monday morning, I discovered my mother had created a family group chat titled "Seattle Move Planning" that included my parents, Derek, Jessica, and me. Messages had already been exchanged discussing logistics, timelines, and what furniture would fit in Norton's house. I left the group immediately, sending a private message to all participants. "Please, stop planning as if this is happening. It's not. I'm not offering my house to Derek and Jessica. I need you all to respect this decision." The response was swift and unified. My father called, his voice tight with anger. "You're being ridiculous, Norton. This isn't just about you anymore. There are babies involved now, your niece and nephew. Do you want them living in a cramped apartment when you have a perfectly good house with room to spare?" "Their living situation isn't my responsibility," I replied, hating how cold it sounded but needing to establish this boundary clearly. Derek and Jessica chose to have children. They need to figure out their own housing. "I can't believe you're being this selfish," he said, his disappointment evident. "Your mother and I raised you better than this." The conversation ended with my father warning that I was tearing the family apart with my stubbornness. Similar calls from my mother followed, though her tactics were more emotional than confrontational. She spoke of family legacy, of the special bond between twins and their uncle, of how this arrangement could heal old wounds between Derek and me. "Mom," I finally interrupted during one such call, "did it ever occur to you that I might want to start my own family someday? That I bought a house for my future, not to solve Derek's problems?" "Of course," she replied, though her tone suggested it hadn't actually crossed her mind. "But that's someday. Derek and Jessica need help now." As Christmas approached, the pressure intensified. Extended family members began to weigh in, having apparently been briefed on the situation by my parents. Aunt Patricia called to mediate, though her idea of mediation seemed to involve explaining all the ways I was wrong while suggesting compromises that still involved Derek and Jessica moving in. "Maybe they could pay you a small rent," she suggested, "or help with utilities. Wouldn't that be fair?" Uncle Robert, surprisingly, took my side. "It's your house, kid," he said when he called. "You worked for it. You decide who lives in it. Don't let them guilt you into something you'll resent." His support was a lifeline in the storm of family pressure, but it also further divided the family as people began taking sides. Cousin Angela called to apologize for inadvertently starting the drama by mentioning the house to the family. I had no idea it would turn into this situation, she said. For what it's worth, I think you have every right to say no. The conflict began to affect other areas of my life. I was distracted at work, missing details in meetings and falling behind on projects. My boss, Laura, called me into her office to discuss my performance. "You're one of our best," she said kindly, "but something's clearly going on. Is everything okay?" I gave her a sanitized version of the situation, feeling embarrassed to admit the full extent of the family drama. "Take some time if you need it," she advised. "Family conflicts can be all-consuming if you let them." Marcus, witnessing my stress, suggested family therapy. "Get a neutral third party involved," he urged after listening to my latest update on the situation. "Someone who can help everyone communicate more effectively." I laughed humorlessly. They don't want effective communication. They want compliance. Still, I tried to be reasonable. I spent an evening researching affordable housing options in Portland that might work for Derek and Jessica. I compiled a list of 3-bedroom apartments within their budget, even offering to help with their first month's rent as a gift. I suggested they could stay with our parents temporarily while looking for a suitable place. I researched programs for first-time homebuyers that might help them get their own place. I presented these alternatives during a video call with my parents and Derek, hoping to show that I wasn't dismissing their needs, just protecting my boundaries. "This isn't about money," my mother dismissed, barely glancing at the options I'd prepared. "It's about family being there for each other." "I am trying to be there for you," I insisted, "just not in the way you're demanding." "If you really wanted to help, you'd open your home," my father countered. "Everything else is just excuses." The conversation devolved from there, ending with my father delivering an ultimatum. "If you can't put family first and help your brother when he needs it, then don't bother coming home for Christmas." I sat in stunned silence as the call ended, the screen going dark before I could respond. Was I really being disinvited from Christmas for refusing to give up my house? It seemed surreal, yet completely in character for my family's dynamic. I decided to call their bluff, sending a brief message to the family group. "I respect your decision. I won't be joining for Christmas this year. I wish everyone happy holidays." I expected a retraction, an apology, some acknowledgement that the ultimatum had been issued in the heat of the moment. Instead, my mother replied, "We're very disappointed in your choice, Norton. The invitation remains open if you reconsider your position." And just like that, I was spending Christmas alone in my house, the very house that had become the center of this family schism. I decorated a small tree, bought myself a few wrapped gifts to put under it, and tried to convince myself that this peaceful solitude was preferable to the tension and drama of a family holiday. But on Christmas morning, sitting alone in my living room with a cup of coffee and a half-hearted attempt at cinnamon rolls, I couldn't help but question my decision. Was my house, this structure of wood and brick, worth the family relationships I seemed to be losing? Was I really in the right? Or was I clinging to a principle at the expense of something more valuable? These questions haunted me through the holiday and into the new year, as the silence from my family grew more pronounced and my uncertainty more debilitating. January arrived cold and unforgiving, both in weather and in family relations. The holidays had passed with minimal communication beyond obligatory Merry Christmas texts. I had sent gifts for my parents, and Derek and Jessica gift cards, impersonal but practical, and received a fruit basket in return addressed from the family. I was settling back into my work routine, trying to put the conflict behind me, when my phone lit up with a text from Derek. "Found a place. 3-bedroom apartment near Jessica's parents. Moving in next week." I felt a surge of relief, followed quickly by confusion. If they had found a suitable place so easily, why had there been such intense pressure for them to move into my house? Before I could formulate a response, my phone rang, my father's number flashing on the screen. "Your brother found an apartment," he said without greeting when I answered. "No thanks to you." The relief I had felt evaporated. "I'm glad they found something that works for them," I replied carefully. "They had to settle," my father continued. "It's a third-floor walk-up, no elevator. Do you know how difficult that will be with twin infants? With grocery trips? With strollers?" I bit back a retort about exercise being good for them, knowing it would only escalate tensions. "I'm sure they'll manage. Lots of families do." "They wouldn't have had to manage if you hadn't been so selfish," he snapped. "Jessica's parents had to co-sign the lease and contribute to the security deposit. That should have been your role as brother and uncle." "Dad, I offered to help with their first month's rent," I reminded him. "You all rejected that offer because it wasn't what they needed," he exploded. "They needed a home, not a handout." The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with my father declaring that my refusal to help Derek had revealed my true character or lack thereof. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me shaking with a mixture of anger and hurt. My mother called next, her approach different, but the message essentially the same. Her voice trembled with emotion as she spoke of family bonds being irreparably damaged, and how she had failed as a mother if I could be so callous toward my own brother. When I tried to explain my perspective again, she broke down in tears, saying she couldn't understand how her son could be so cold. These conversations set the tone for what would become known in my mind as the nuclear fallout. The situation had escalated beyond a disagreement about housing arrangements into a fundamental questioning of my character, values, and place in the family. As January progressed, I discovered through social media that an extended family gathering had taken place, a belated holiday celebration to which I had not been invited. Photos showed my parents, Derek and Jessica, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins all together, conspicuously missing only me. The caption on one photo, posted by a distant cousin, read, "Family is everything. Blessed family first." It felt like a deliberate message, though I couldn't be certain. Through Aunt Patricia, I learned that my parents had been telling family members that I had promised Derek he could live in my house, then reneged when Jessica got pregnant. This fictional version of events cast me as not only selfish but actively deceitful. Furious at this misrepresentation, I called my parents to confront them. The conversation quickly became heated. "I never promised anyone anything about my house," I insisted. "How could I? I didn't even tell you I bought it until Thanksgiving." "You implied you would help," my father countered. "You always talk about wanting a better relationship with your brother. This was your chance to prove it." "That's not how relationships work," I argued. "You don't prove your love by giving away your home." "No one asked you to give it away," my mother interjected. "Just to share it temporarily." "Temporarily?" I questioned. No one ever mentioned temporarily. And even if they had, it's still my decision who lives in my house. Your house, my father mocked. "Is that all you care about? Material possessions? What about people, Norton? What about family?" The conversation spiraled further, touching on old wounds and resentments. My father brought up college. "We couldn't afford to help you and Derek." My career choices, always chasing money instead of meaning, and even childhood slights I had long forgotten. My mother alternated between tearful pleas and cold disapproval. By the end of the call, my father had declared, in a moment of unrestrained anger, "You're no longer our son." My mother didn't contradict him. The call ended abruptly, and when I tried to call back, I discovered they had blocked my number. I sat in stunned silence, my phone clutched in my hand. Had I just been disowned over a housing dispute? It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was there in the form of a blocked number and my father's unambiguous declaration. Derek's response to the situation was passive-aggressive at best. He sent occasional updates about the twins' development with messages like, "Thought you might want to know, since you're technically still their uncle," or photos of their cramped apartment with captions like, "Making it work, despite everything." The emotional toll became severe. I struggled to sleep, spending nights staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, and imagining alternative scenarios where things didn't fall apart. I experienced anxiety attacks for the first time in my life, my heart racing and breath shortening at unexpected moments in meetings, at the grocery store, even while watching TV. My work performance continued to suffer, with Laura pulling me aside again to express concern. "Whatever's going on, Norton, you need to address it," she said gently but firmly. "Take some time off if necessary. See a professional. But don't let it consume you like this." Taking her advice, I scheduled an appointment with a therapist, Dr. Ellis, who specialized in family conflicts. During our first session, I poured out the entire situation, feeling alternately justified and ridiculous as I explained how a house purchase had led to being essentially disowned. Dr. Ellis listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she sat thoughtfully for a moment before speaking. "What you're describing," she said carefully, "sounds like a family system with some deeply entrenched patterns. The house situation may be the current conflict, but the dynamics behind it, favoritism, dismissal of boundaries, emotional manipulation, these aren't new, are they?" I shook my head, tears unexpectedly welling up at having someone validate what I had felt for years but rarely articulated. "Your parents' response is extreme," she continued, "which suggests this isn't really about the house at all. It's about control and established roles within the family. You've disrupted those roles by setting a boundary and sticking to it." Over several sessions, Dr. Ellis helped me recognize patterns of manipulation in my family's behavior. The guilt trips, the shifting of goalposts, the rewriting of history to suit their narrative. She helped me understand that while I couldn't control their reactions, I could control my response to them. "Setting boundaries isn't selfish," she assured me. "It's necessary for healthy relationships. The people who get angry at your boundaries are usually the ones who benefited from you having none." Armed with this perspective, I drafted an email to my parents. I explained my feelings clearly, but without accusation. I acknowledged their disappointment while standing firm on my decision. I expressed hope for eventual reconciliation, but emphasized that it would need to be based on mutual respect and acceptance of boundaries. Their response was swift and explosive. My father replied with a lengthy email detailing all my failings as a son, culminating in the assertion that I had chosen bricks and mortar over flesh and blood. My mother's separate email was shorter but perhaps more painful, stating simply that she had failed as a mother if this was the kind of person I had become. I tried one last time with a phone call to my father's work number, which apparently hadn't been blocked. He answered, and for a brief moment, I hoped for a breakthrough. Instead, he reiterated his position in no uncertain terms. "Until you're ready to be part of this family on our terms, you're not welcome. Don't call again." I blocked their numbers after that, not out of spite, but self-preservation. Dr. Ellis had emphasized the importance of protecting my mental health, and each interaction was leaving me more drained and defeated than the last. For a week, I barely left my house except for work and therapy. I declined social invitations, ignored messages from friends, and subsisted on delivery food and minimal sleep. I questioned everything: my decision to buy the house, my refusal to let Derek move in, even my move to Seattle years ago. Maybe if I had stayed in Portland, remained closer to family, things would have been different. It was the lowest point in my life, a period of profound isolation and self-doubt. The house, which had once represented achievement and independence, now felt tainted by conflict and loss. I even briefly considered selling it, as if removing the physical object of contention might somehow repair the relationship. But deep down, I knew the issues ran much deeper than real estate. The path to healing wasn't quick or straightforward. It began with small steps, forcing myself to return friends' calls, accepting Marcus's invitation to dinner, and most importantly, continuing therapy with Dr. Ellis. She suggested I join a support group for adult children of difficult parents, assuring me that my experience, while painful, was far from unique. The first support group meeting was intimidating. I sat in the back, listening as others shared stories of familial manipulation, unreasonable expectations, and the pain of setting boundaries. When my turn came, I spoke hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence as I saw nods of recognition around the room. No one questioned whether I was right to refuse my house to Derek. No one suggested I was selfish for maintaining this boundary. Instead, they offered understanding and validation I had been desperately seeking. In that group, I met Sarah, whose parents had stopped speaking to her when she chose a career they disapproved of rather than joining the family business. Her experience paralleled mine in many ways, and we began meeting for coffee before group sessions to talk. Her friendship became invaluable as I navigated my new reality. The hardest part, she told me during one of these conversations, is accepting that you can't make them understand your perspective if they're not willing to listen. You can only control your response. With support from Sarah, the group, Dr. Ellis, and my pre-existing friends, I began rebuilding my sense of self and security. Marcus organized regular game nights at my house, filling it with laughter and creating new, positive memories in the space. My neighbor Thomas invited me to join his community garden plot, teaching me the satisfaction of growing my own food. Co-workers became friends as I opened up more about my life outside of work. Slowly, I formed what Dr. Ellis called a chosen family, a network of supportive relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care, rather than obligation or shared DNA. This concept was healing, allowing me to see that family connections could be nurturing and positive rather than extractive and conditional. 6 months passed without contact from my parents. Through mutual connections, I learned that Derek and Jessica had settled into their apartment. My mother had decorated a nursery corner in their home for when she babysat. My father had taken a woodworking class and built cribs for the twins. Life had continued for them, as it had for me, just along separate paths. When the twins were born in July, a boy named Richard after my father and a girl named Elaine after my mother, I received no official announcement. I learned about their birth through Angela, who sent me photos with a tentative message. Thought you might want to see your niece and nephew. No pressure to respond. I did respond, sending a generous gift basket with baby essentials and 2 savings bonds for their education. I included a simple note. Congratulations on your new family. Wishing you all the best. Uncle Norton. I received no acknowledgement from Derek or Jessica, but Angela reported that the gifts had arrived and been opened. It was a small connection, but it felt important to establish that despite everything, I didn't extend my conflict with their parents to these innocent children. Work became a source of stability and pride again. The focus I had regained through therapy and support allowed me to excel once more, resulting in a promotion to development team lead. My colleagues celebrated with me, organizing a surprise party that left me feeling valued and appreciated in a way my family had rarely managed. As the 1-year anniversary of my house purchase approached, I decided to mark the occasion by hosting a small dinner party. Sitting at my dining table, surrounded by friends who had supported me through the darkest period of my life, I shared a toast. A year ago, I bought this house thinking it would just be a place to live, I said. I had no idea it would become the catalyst for the most difficult and ultimately transformative year of my life. Thank you all for being here, for helping me turn it into a true home. Later that evening, as guests were leaving, my phone dinged with an email notification. The sender's address made my heart race. Jessica, Derek's wife. I waited until everyone had left before opening it. Norton, she wrote. I've wanted to reach out for months but wasn't sure how. The gift for the twins was thoughtful. Thank you. I want you to know, I never agreed with how your parents and Derek handled the house situation. I was pregnant and scared, and didn't feel I could speak up against the family momentum. The twins are 3 months old now, and they've made me think a lot about family and what I want to model for them. I don't want them growing up thinking it's okay to treat people the way you were treated. I'm sorry for my part in it. If you're ever open to meeting your niece and nephew, I'd like that. No pressure, no expectations. Just an open door if you want it." I read the email several times, emotions churning. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement, the first from anyone in my family, that perhaps I hadn't been entirely in the wrong. I replied carefully, thanking her for reaching out and expressing interest in meeting the twins, perhaps when things were less raw. This exchange opened a small channel of communication. Jessica would occasionally send photos of the twins with brief updates. I responded with appropriate enthusiasm while maintaining careful boundaries. Eventually, I suggested meeting in a neutral location when they visited Seattle for a pediatric appointment. The meeting was awkward but not hostile, and holding my niece and nephew for the first time was more emotional than I had anticipated. Derek was civil but distant during this meeting, clearly uncomfortable but making an effort for Jessica's sake. We didn't discuss the past directly, but as we were leaving, he said quietly, "The apartment's working out fine. The stairs are good exercise." It wasn't an apology, but it felt like an oblique acknowledgement that perhaps the housing crisis hadn't been as dire as it had been portrayed. My parents remained entrenched in their position. They made no attempts to contact me, and when I asked Derek if they knew about our meeting, he admitted they didn't. "They're still pretty hurt," he said, which seemed like a massive understatement given their complete excommunication of their son. Dr. Ellis helped me process these complex emotions: the joy of connecting with my niece and nephew, the tentative bridge with Jessica, the limited progress with Derek, and the continued estrangement from my parents. "Healing isn't linear," she reminded me, "and it doesn't always include complete reconciliation. Sometimes, the healthiest outcome involves acceptance of a new normal." That new normal gradually took shape over the following months. I maintained limited contact with Jessica and the twins, sent birthday and Christmas gifts, and occasionally joined video calls to see how they were growing. Derek and I established a polite but distant relationship, like acquaintances who shared a complicated history rather than brothers. My parents remained absent from my life, though I heard through family channels that they were aware of my limited connection with the twins, and disapproved but hadn't forbidden it. As I approached the second anniversary of my house purchase, I realized how much had changed. The house itself had evolved, reflecting my personal growth. I had finished projects that had been on hold during the family crisis. I had planted a garden with Thomas's guidance. I had created a space that truly felt like an extension of myself, a place of safety, creativity, and peace. More importantly, I had changed. The people-pleaser who had once feared disapproval had been replaced by someone with clearer boundaries and a stronger sense of self-worth. The pain of family estrangement hadn't disappeared, but it had become a dull ache rather than an acute agony. I had built a life filled with meaningful connections that weren't contingent on sacrificing my own needs and boundaries. As I sit here now, writing this from the home office that became such a point of contention, I can't say I've found perfect resolution. My relationship with my parents remains severed, though I've left the door open should they ever be willing to respect my boundaries. My connection with Derek is tentative at best, but I've found peace in knowing that standing up for myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. Sometimes love means drawing a line. Sometimes family is found rather than given. And sometimes a house isn't just a structure of wood and brick, but a symbol of independence, growth, and self-respect. My house became the battlefield for a war I never wanted to fight, but in defending it, I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed and built connections more authentic than those I lost. If you're facing a similar battle over boundaries with family, know that you're not alone. Your needs matter. Your boundaries are valid. And sometimes, the hardest choice standing firm when everyone is pushing you to bend is the one that leads to the most meaningful growth. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with family? How did they react? And how did you handle it? Drop a comment below to share your experience. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and hit that share button to help others who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, blood may be thicker than water, but respect should be thicker than both.